usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live podcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back here on this late Sunday night. We are 1 hour late because I was I was on the road, But better late than never, like we oftentimes say. So it's a pleasure to be here with you guys for whatever amount of time we shall be able to accord you tonight. But yeah, it's been that kind of Sunday, quite eventful in the world of football. As we speak, there's a big game in the Italian Serie A between AC Roma and Napoli, and that game is still one apiece as we speak. So, very, very interesting action over there at the moment. That game is around the 62nd minute of the game. So, beautiful, beautiful action of football that is ongoing. Then also in the Spanish La Liga, Real Mallorca are up against Real Betis, and Real Betis are leading by 2 goals to nil. Then the goals for AC Roma were from Daniel Malen from Aston Villa on loan there, as well as Spinazzola for Napoli or for the Antonio Conte side. And then in the French League One, Olympique Lyon are leading Nice by 1 goal to nil. So then we'll be talking about the FA Cup, where Arsenal did thrash Wigan Athletic by 4 goals to nil. All 4 goals scored in the first half. You could argue that perhaps in the second half there's plenty that they could have, buried in the back of the net, but couldn't. But instead hit the base of the upright through a deflected shot by Victor Gyökeres. So there's been that. There's so many key moments, so many takeaways. I did not get to watch the full game or the entirety of the game minute by minute, but I managed to get the best of that, whatever glimpse of episodes or snippets that I could catch during my escapades over Sunday. So, and then of course, that means the Gunners are through to the fifth round, as one would have expected. Pretty much, it's the kind of result, not the kind of score we had predicted, but it's the kind of result that we had hoped for. We had expected for Arsenal to get in that kind of fixture. Unfortunately, just as the case often is with Arsenal, particularly this season, is that they did sustain another injury in that game, particularly during the build-up to that game, because in the warm-up for the game, Ricardo Carafiori, who had been named in the starting 11 as a left-back with Mazlou Skelly as a midfielder, suffered an injury during the warm-up, forcing Arsenal to push Mazlou Skelly to left-back, and then the Gunners were forced to start Bukayo Saka in a game that perhaps they would have loved to have him rested, given that he just returned from injury in that game against Brentford, in which he came on and did not really have much to do. So we'll find some of the comments from Mikel Arteta regarding those events, but for different goal scorers in that game, one being an own goal. So we'll get to discuss about that and any other news that is making the rounds in the sport. Like I told you yesterday, but further, we did get that confirmation from Nottingham Forest about the appointment of Vitor Pereira as the head coach for Nottingham Forest until the end of the season. So, and then also, I wish to extend my sincere gratitude to all of you that made, to the conversation from last night is, excuse me, for those of you that were part of the conversation last night, for the watch along for the game between Real Madrid, and Real Sociedad, then the game between Inter Milan and Juventus, and then the game between Liverpool and Brighton Hove Albion in the FA Cup there. So for those of you that made it to that broadcast, thank you so much for sparing the time to be with us for almost 2 hours. Fernando Hernandez says hi. Hi, Fernando. Where are you joining us from? Good evening and welcome to the Football Tribe UG channel. I'm seeing you for the first time, so I do appreciate you sparing the minute to be with us. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. I do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda, where it's 11 minutes past midnight. Yes, past midnight. That's where I'm joining you from or coming to you live from. And anything you do to leave me a like, to leave me a subscription on the broadcast, on the channel, I will be really, really much appreciated. Thank you so much for the sub. It's a football channel. It's a sports channel. We get to talk about majority football. That's why it's called Football Tribe UG, and we are based in Kampala, Uganda. So thank you so much for the love and support. It will be interesting knowing what country you're joining us from and perhaps what time it is, because sometimes we get people joining us at very odd hours, which is quite a positive for us there, given the circumstances. And then also, really, anyways, it is what it is for what's happened throughout the course of the day. And without wasting any further ado, I think there's only one place that maybe best suits the rest of the world for us to start on, or not to start on, is from the results from that FA Cup. We know that we've been at the fourth round, which has 32 games to be played. Okay, thank you. Which has 16 games to be played with 32 teams involved. And we've gone through majority of those. And by now, we know what majority of the results are. But for those of you that are not aware, like I said, Arsenal beat up against Wigan Athletic by 4-0. We're going to discuss that game in a bit. Sunderland were 1-0 winners against Oxford. Our prediction was Sunderland to go through, just like we predicted Fulham would get ahead of Stoke City. They managed to win that game by 2-1. Wolverhampton Wanderers knocked out Grimsby Town by 1-0. Grimsby Town made news this season when they knocked out Manchester United at, I think it was the third round of the EFL Cup or the Carabao Cup. Then on post-match penalties, Leeds managed to knock out Birmingham City by 4-2. That proceeded a 1-1 draw, while yesterday in the late kickoff, Liverpool beat Brighton by 3-0. And those goals are coming through Mohamed Salah's penalty, late on Dominic Szoboszlai and Curtis Jones. Then Manchester City were 2-0 winners against Salford City with Mark Kehi among the goal scorers in that one. And I think the other was an own goal from Alfie Darrington, unfortunately for the Salford player there. Then Newcastle were knocked out Aston Villa, a 10-man Aston Villa by 3-1. We spoke about Mark Bizot, who committed a very horrendous foul against, I think it was Jacob Murphy there to get himself sent off. You say, what do you do for a living? I do content creation, I do social media management, digital communications and PR, and things in that line, among other things. Then, of course, we spoke about Southampton knocking out Leicester City by 2-1, while Mansfield Town knocked out Burnley by 2-1. Then West Brom were knocked out by Norwich City by beating them by 3-1, while West Ham got the better of Burton in a 0-0 victory. Chelsea earlier on Friday had beat up against Hull City by 4-0 with a hat-trick from Pedro Neto, while the other was from Willian Esteval. And then Wrexham knocked out Ipswich Town. So back to the context of the Arsenal game. Very beautiful game of football. Arsenal quite very, very dominant in the first half. But I think they saw no reason to continue with their emphatic road to victory in the second half, in the late kickoff that kicked off at 7:30 p.m. on Super Sunday. So many key points to take away from, but like I said, the unfortunate news for the Gunners is that they got an injury for Ricardo Carafiori, for a player that has been so pivotal to them this season. Arguably, I think for the first half of the season, you could argue he could compete among Arsenal's best players. He's been disturbed with a couple of injuries, on and off injuries that have sort of put him off his game. And not so far back, he had just returned from actually an injury. So we'll wait to hear from Mikel Arteta how big or bad that injury is. You say who is better, Messi or Ronaldo? I say they are both tremendously good players or great players that we've been blessed both to watch. So unfortunately for me, it's not a choice between the two. It's an appreciation of the two players who, I think we've watched for the longest of their careers. Cristiano Ronaldo, aged at 41 now, Lionel Messi, 38, coming on 39, thereabout, or if not 39 already. So, and yet they are still playing at the highest level that they can afford to, with Lionel Messi playing over there in the Major League Soccer and Cristiano Ronaldo at Al Nassr in the Saudi Pro League. So, I have to go. I'm sorry. It's all right. Thank you so much for the time you managed to dedicate to us. It's been much appreciated. Maybe next time you'll be able to join us for much longer than you have this time round. So thank you so much. I would not take that for granted. Meanwhile, AC Roma have taken the lead against Napoli from the penalty spot. So that game is 2-1. There, I think it's Daniel Malin once again from the penalty spot that has scored to give AC Roma the 2-1 lead against the reigning champions of the Scudetto. Who is better between Kylian Mbappe and Rafinha? I say Kylian Mbappe is a better goal scorer, an all-round better footballer than Rafinha, and has been more consistent over his career. Rafinha, a very brilliant player, but one you could pass for a bit of a late developer, given that I think last season is the first time we saw him in his best season, at a time when even Barcelona were pondering moving him on until Hansi Flick comes in and he sort of changes his world, makes him part of the leadership group by giving him the armband and things like that. So he's doing wonderfully. He's doing wonders, but let's not forget that Kylian Mbappe has been playing at the top level for quite some time, including winning the World Cup in 2018 before being a losing finalist in 2022 in the Qatar edition. So that's the kind of player that we are comparing. So in a nutshell, I could say we are comparing apples and oranges in this particular case. So in my humble opinion, that's how I would put it. So anyways, back to the Arsenal game. Like I said, a very dominant first half performance in which you say, how is carrying Real Madrid? He is carrying Real Madrid this season. I think he has about 38 goals across all competitions already. Brilliant. Thanks for your services. That is Mosinguzi Evans. The name sounds more Ugandan than even my own name. Thank you so much, Mosinguzi Evans. Why are you joining us from Mosinguzi? It's a pleasure to have you on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast. Look for where you see a head kind of sign. That means people, and click on that. It will show you the like button and like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. Then, okay, I have somebody called Ahmed. Ahmed, I need to read your comment properly. You say W Football Tribe, UG. Thank you so much, Ahmed. How is he carrying Real Madrid? Okay, I think I responded to that. And then, all right. So, back to the Arsenal conversation, guys. Sorry that I keep, moving on from one topic and then jumping back to the other. It's because I do value your engagement. I do value your comments. So when somebody puts a question across that I can answer in a snapshot, I tend to eat and we move on. So like I said, a very dominant first half performance from the Gunners with Eberechi Eze providing a burst of assists in a space of just 7 minutes, because Noni Madueke opened the scoring with a sublime finish in the 11th minute before Gabriel Martinelli also netted his own, and then Hunt scored an own goal. I think it was a cross from Noni Madueke, which Gabriel Martinelli tries to connect with, but somehow it goes through him, and Hunt heads it into the back of his own net. Quite unfortunate there. Somebody's asking, who do I think deserves the Ballon d'Or this season? I don't think anybody deserves the Ballon d'Or this season. And the reason for that is simple, because nobody has won anything yet. We're still a little away from the end of the season. You never know. Maybe Barcelona or Real Madrid. No, maybe it's now impossible for Barcelona, but maybe it's impossible for Real Madrid, but maybe Barcelona win the domestic treble. Maybe Arsenal win a quadruple. Maybe they do not. And whoever wins the World Cup could have an impact on who wins the Ballon d'Or, because it's a World Cup year, 2026, that will be hosted in the United States of America, Canada, and Mexico. So it's going to have a huge bearing on that. So that's why I cannot tell you who I think will win the Ballon d'Or this year. But Kylian Mbappe could be a contender, depending on what they can win domestically. That's with Real Madrid, and then we see his performance in the World Cup. So we have to just wait and see. But who is doing great this season? Like I said, Kylian Mbappe is doing well. There's some players that are not even being thought of, but I thought Zubimendi is doing well. Look at Brad Erling Haaland; he's getting the job done at Manchester City. Antoine Semenyo has been quite, the limelight. Go over to I think Senegal. Sadio Mane is done brilliant. They won the Africa Cup of Nations. I can't say it will have bearing on the Ballon d'Or winner, but like I said, we just have to wait. When the season ends and we know who has won the Champions League, we know who has won what domestic league, then it's easy for us to start drawing some insights in who we think can win the Ballon d'Or, just like pretty much we did last season. Remember, among the contenders for the Ballon d'Or was Mohamed Salah, won the Premier League and Golden Boot, including breaking a Premier League goal involvement record that was held by, I think, Andy Cole and Alan Shearer. Then for a single season, then you had Rafinha reach the semi-finals of the UEFA Champions League after winning a treble, a domestic treble. That's the Supercopa Hispana, Spanish Liga, and Copa del Rey. You had people like, Vitinha, people like Ousmane Dembele, who was the eventual winner. We know what they managed to do, winning the UEFA Champions League and winning every piece of silverware there was for them to win domestically in France before reaching the finals of the FIFA Club World Cup, in which they got beat by Chelsea by 3-0. So really, that is what gave us the insight of arriving to that kind of stage and things like that. So until we get to that final stage of the season, it's really, really hard for me to sit here and say, at the end of the day, this one is the one going to come out on top. We're in a bit of an odd season where even some top teams that are high on their respective league tables have not had so many standout players. But when you go to Bayern Munich, you have a player like Luis Diaz and Harry Kane having incredible seasons in terms of goal scoring and goal involvement. So those could be options, but it will also depend what they are able to do at the World Cup. Mosinguzi comes back to say, I'm from Uganda, but I want to know Mikel Merino's injury, how long it will be, how long it will take. Unfortunately, there's no good news for Mikel Merino. What I can give you is reports that we are hearing. There's speculation that it could take longer than earlier on anticipated. There was an anticipation that he could return in late April. However, most recent reports did suggest that it could be as long as or as many as 5 months, that which then essentially means that he possibly misses the World Cup. And remember, when he got injured, before even undergoing his surgery, according to Marca in Spain, they wrote a report or a story allaying their fears that he could be out of the Spanish national team squad for the World Cup, given his foot injury, right foot that needed surgery. But he did undergo a successful surgery, and he's undergoing his rehabilitation or his healing process. So we can only wait and see. But also, let's not forget for a fact that he could maybe be back on time or in time for the World Cup, or even maybe for the tail end of the season for the Arsenal. But then he suffers an injury setback. Remember what happened to Kai Havertz. He had been expected to be due back in November, but then during November he suffered that setback. According to Julian Nagelsmann, then we thought it was December. December did not come until late Jan, and he's been in action for 1 month, and then he's gone back, back to the sick bay through a muscular injury, and it's feared he could be out for. We're not sure how long. The club will continue to assess him and see. So it's been that kind of season, like I said, for the Gunners, where every game week they've literally had an injury issue to worry about. While you're welcoming back Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard suffered an injury in their 1-1 draw against Brentford. While he says that it's not as bad as first feared, because he said he managed to play on after getting the injury in the game, but then when he slept overnight, when he woke up, it had a swelling, which was a bit concerning, but then some assessments were done, or preliminary assessments, that showed that it's not as bad as first feared, so only time will tell. We know that he missed today's game through that injury. We do not know whether he will be available for Arsenal's rescheduled fixture against Wolverhampton Wanderers in midweek, next week on Wednesday. So we can only wait and see. Rudolph King says, I don't know if that means hi, but he says V8FX5. What about Martin Odegaard's injury? I think I've given you the insight in trying to explain what Mikel Merino has gone through. So for Martin Odegaard, like I said, he says it's not as bad as first feared. We can only wait and see if he can make it back for the Wolverhampton Wanderers game. Although I feel it could come a little too early for him. Perhaps we could see him maybe come in the North London derby on February 22nd when Arsenal make the trip to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. You never know. It's a mere hope. It's not a statement of fact, in that respect and regard. Then also, okay, getting back to the game against Wigan Athletic. Like I said, in the warm-up, just like Bukayo Saka in the warm-up for their game against Leeds United, Ricardo Carafiori too suffered that injury and they had to swap him out for Bukayo Saka, who looked very unfit when he came on in the 1-1 draw against Brentford. So then in the 27th minute, we are reverting back to the game between Arsenal and Wigan Athletic. Gabriel Jesus scores a brilliant goal, sort of a flick over the head of the goalkeeper to make it 4-0. That's before the half-hour mark. You can imagine Arsenal scored 4 goals in a space of what? In a space of about I think 16 minutes. Yes. So with Christian Nørgaard providing the assist. Now, 2 things I noted. Eberechi Eze, he was played in sort of a deeper role alongside Christian Nørgaard, and the kind of passes that he plays to find people in spaces in between the lines was really, really incredible to watch. And it made me wonder, why doesn't he get to do that more often in the Premier League? Now, again, today it didn't feel like it was robotic play. Sometimes Arsenal play, and it feels like it's a bit of robotic play for them. Yo, it's you again. I think I've seen you before. Hi, Pedri. How are you doing, my brother? You have to wait until tomorrow for your game. But it's always a pleasure to see you around, Pedri. So today didn't feel like it was robotic. Sometimes Arsenal play in such a structured manner. Meanwhile, Napoli have the equalizer against AC Roma. That game is 2-2 as we speak. So looks like Napoli are not going to go down without a fight. So, but today it didn't feel that way for Eberechi Eze. I mean, 2 assists in a space of 7 minutes. And both passes, he shows you his capability, that he's capable of being that guy that creates for you chances, lots and lots of chances, finding people quickly in between the lines without needing to hold on to the ball a little too much. Now, for what he gives you in that, then you sacrifice for what Odegaard gives you with him when it comes to ball control and dictating the tempo of the game. Eze is not the kind of guy that is going to help you dictate the tempo of the game and things like that. You need Zubimendi to be at the top of his game to help you dictate the tempo of the game if Eze is going to execute. Unfortunately, he did not look that good in their 1-1 draw against Brentford, to the extent that he was withdrawn at halftime to pave way for the captain, Martin Odegaard. So, you say, but Lewis Kelly played well against Wigan Athletic. I mean, it was such an incredible performance. Like I said, I did not get to watch the game minute by minute, but from the snippets that I was getting, and of course watching some of the highlights, he had a brilliant game, and many of those Arsenal players had a brilliant game. Even Kepa Arrizabalaga, one moment he pulled off a very brilliant save, and eventually was withdrawn off late on in the game to pave way for Tommy Setford. But we'll get to that maybe. But I thought Eberechi Eze was a standout for me, especially in those moments. And it wasn't just those moments. I think he had 2 opportunities, particularly in the second half, where he forces the goalkeeper into a brilliant save. One was a brilliant save, and another, I think he put the ball in the side nets. Then also, Christian Nørgaard, he provided the assist with an over-the-top or overhead top pass to Gabriel Jesus. Brilliant pass there that he plays to find Gabriel Jesus. But also, I think it is in the first goal, either in the first goal or in the second, where he provides the pre-assist to the goal. And in the way he finds Eberechi Eze in the sort of advanced area of midfield was simply impressive to watch. And it got me back to my question and my thinking or theory or observation that why is Mikel Arteta not utilizing Christian Nørgaard more often than not, you know, and particularly in the Premier League to see out games or to try and open games that are sim-locked. Why? Because he has that fine pass. He is a player with experience. He knows the Premier League. He's been a captain of a team for in the Premier League for about 4 seasons or thereabout when he was at Brentford, you know. So he's and the other day I got surprised, perhaps in a way that when Leandro Trossard spoke about his influence, even though he doesn't play much, you know, he's sort of the kind of player that helps the team to stay focused. You know, he has that leadership about him. And watching him time and again, and one would argue that, yeah, well, you're talking about Wigan Athletic. They looked more open. They gave away so many spaces, and it was easy for some of these Arsenal players to shine. But when they've been tested at the highest of levels, maybe they've not delivered to the expectations. One would make that argument, and I would understand saying it being Wigan Athletic. But all I'm saying is that perhaps they need to be given an even bigger chance to play in a more open way or in a way that suits them to try and, you know, leverage. Because, like I said, against Brentford, Eberechi Eze did not paint himself in any glory. But if he needed to recover from that kind of performance, he did tremendously well today. You say, but Arteta should start trusting Madueke than Saka. I mean, for every time Bukayo Saka has been out through injury, he's trusted Noni Madueke. And as good as Noni Madueke is, my challenge with him is always that final ball, that final pass, that final cross, that final assist that he attempts to make. That's where I have, you know, the finishing. You know, yes, he scored a couple of goals here and there. He scored against Bayern Munich. He scored against Club Brugge. He scored against, I think, Leeds United. He scored even today. So yes, he's scored a couple of goals here and there and provided a few assists there. And I think what the way I understand your submission also is in part because Bukayo Saka, if we are being honest, has not had a great season. First of all, it's been the kind of season where he's suffered perhaps one too many injuries. That's for sure. 2, apologies. 2, besides the injuries, that he suffered, when he's been on, he's not been as elite as we are accustomed to him. His assists have fallen far between, just as much as his goals. So he's not been at the best of his level, given his own standards that we are accustomed to. So the demand for Noni Madueke largely comes from that. But let's be honest, Noni Madueke has had equally a couple of inconsistent performances. And I'll tell you that there's a game that he played brilliantly well against Nottingham Forest. Looked brilliant. Against Liverpool away to Anfield. Looked brilliant in the first half. But, you know, sometimes that final touch, that last ball, that pass, that cross has let him down, And as much as I love him, he can take on players, move bodies around, find space, you know, but that last minute decision making, that final element to it is what is still lacking for him. So, but he's been trusted. Every time Bukayo Saka has had an issue, he's been, you know, given the chance to show what he's capable of. And indeed, that's why they bought him. That's why they spent 48 million pounds on him in guaranteed fees and 4 million pounds in expected add-ons to get him out of Chelsea, because they knew they needed a backup for Bukayo Saka, and he's done that. Of course, his best side is on the right side. Sometimes he's been played alongside Bukayo Saka in the same game when he's been played to the left, which doesn't really suit him that much, even though he's capable of playing there, you know. So I understand where you're coming from, and yeah, I totally understand. But he needs also to improve on his finishing touch, because it's not been miles or miles better than Bukayo Saka, what he's been able to do. And let's not forget, Bukayo Saka himself has built himself quite the reputation at Arsenal for a good number of seasons for him to be trusted, even when form may not be on his side. He's the kind of player that you expect that maybe even in a difficult game, in a game where he's not starred, where he's not looked impressive, maybe he can conjure up something at any given moment. So there's also that. So he's built quite the a significant volume or amount of capital in terms of being trusted by Arsenal and Arsenal managers, to come good, even though this season is not his best. So I think we have to take that into context. Like I said, the second half itself did not deliver much. It had, it was a story of missed opportunities on, the other side. Arsenal dominated the game to every possible tune of a thing that you can think of, with 73% of the ball, 3 shots off target, and 6 shots on target. Wigan were limited to 2 shots on target, no shot off target, 27 ball possession there. They had 0 corner kicks compared to Arsenal's 5. So it sort of tells you that. But Arsenal really also needed that kind of performance to sort of lift their spirits in the aftermath of what felt like a very, very difficult game away to the GTEC Stadium when they shared the spoils with Brentford. So they needed that. And then ahead of a very, very crucial game against Wolverhampton Wanderers in midweek. Now, a lot of people have been wondering, why was Arsenal's game rescheduled? Now, that game, first of all, is rescheduled because it was supposed to be played on the weekend of the 21st, 22nd March. And that's the same period when Arsenal will be in the Carabao Cup final against Manchester City. Then, if Arsenal's game against Wolves was rescheduled to this week in midweek, why not the game for Manchester City against Crystal Palace? Because it was set to be played in the same week. Now, unfortunately, for Man City's game, it can't be rescheduled to this week because Crystal Palace have a playoff game in the UEFA Conference League. So it couldn't be played in midweek this week, nor can it be played next week because it's a home and away kind of playoff. So Manchester City will have to wait to find out when the exact period of time that game against Crystal Palace will be rescheduled. So then Cheyne Adams says, what about Manchester United? About Bruno. Manchester United about Bruno? What do you mean Manchester United about Bruno? What exactly are you asking about Bruno? Cheyne, please be a little more specific. I don't know, because your question could be a reaction to some of the comments that you found up earlier on. So I want to understand the context within which you're asking your question, Mr. Cheyne Adams, so that I can be able to respond to you sufficiently. Kindly clarify. I wouldn't want to just hoop onto it and, give you a lot of gibberish, So that's the kind of performance you had for the Arsenal. So on the match to the 50th round, which is the round of 16, essentially for the FA Cup, it's been the kind of weekend usually. And I used to think that maybe it's we that are no longer very sort of eager with these FA Cup games, especially until when it's still in these early stages. Usually people these days get gripped on when it reaches the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and eventually the final. But it's not just us. Even when you look over there in the UK, I'm sure you've seen in some of those grounds, especially if the dominant team or the bigger team has been a Premier League team and they've been at home, you've seen some empty seats. We saw those against in the game for Manchester City. I think we saw them, was it the Chelsea game? There's another game. I can't put my finger quite on it, but you could see some empty seats. Why? Because the sort of enthusiasm around the FA Cup is no longer as high as it used to be. I was watching, I think, a clip from Mark Goldbridge, and he was saying there was a time when winning the FA Cup literally meant more than winning the Premier League title. And I was saying, that's a bit odd. I mean, the league, you need to, be better over a period of 38 games, over a period of 8-9 months. Really, with the FA Cup, you need to just be good over a period of 4 months with one game played perhaps in each of the months, and then you're through, perhaps you win it. So But anyways, it's the oldest competition or football tournament in UK football or in English football and perhaps in football in general. So it has that respect to it. But recent times there's that sort of feeling, and I think Goldbridge was saying something to the respect that it began when the likes of Arsene Wenger started playing, academy and reserve players in this competition. But I think I don't know. Sometimes enthusiasm about a particular competition or any sport can sort of die down gradually as perhaps other competitions of in a similar sport pick up pace or gain popularity and things like that. So I don't know. For some reason, I'm an advocate that usually, especially when it comes to League One, League Two, and maybe championship teams, that when you have these kinds of fixtures at this kind of stage, there should be away fixtures for the bigger teams, because then those smaller teams are are looking more forward to them, because you have stars coming home. They look forward to a big game, are playing on their home turf. Just imagine Man City were playing away to Salford. Just imagine that. Meanwhile, the game between Napoli and Roma is finished 2-2. What's Arsenal's opponent in the FA round of 16? By the time of this podcast, I had yet to find out what the draws were. I don't think they've been conducted yet. I need to cross check, but also we still have 2 games to be played. That's tomorrow. There's one game between Mansfield, and then Brentford, and then on the 3rd of March there's a game between Port Vale and Bristol City. So I need to cross check with the Emirates FA Cup handle and see when or whether those have actually been been conducted. But to the best of my knowledge, they hadn't yet been handled at the time of this podcast. So, but we will find out soon rather than later. I'll be letting you know perhaps when they will be conducted. Maybe we can find out in the course of this particular broadcast. But guys, do not forget, next week we have the UEFA Champions League playoffs, so do not make sure not to miss out on that. So I think we're going for the FA Cup 50th round draws. So let's see. Okay, yeah, the draws will be conducted tomorrow. Tomorrow, Monday, 16th February. That's when we will learn which opponent or which team will be up against who. That's when we will know who Arsenal will be facing. But there's a huge possibility that they could be drawn to a Premier League team. Newcastle is still in, Leicester City are still in, West Ham are still in, Chelsea are still in, maybe Arsenal, I'm sure they would want to avoid the likes of Chelsea. Liverpool are still in, Leeds United are still in, Fulham are still in, Sunderland are in. Usually the hope for these big teams is to avoid Premier League teams or those directly, because the amount of energy or the level of intensity that you need to play with those kinds of opponents, especially if your ambitions are still to go deeper in the competition, is quite higher, especially for teams also that are still involved in multiple competitions. For example, you cite Arsenal in this particular case, but look at Arsenal. They're still in the Champions League. They're trying to battle their way into winning the Premier League title. They are into the finals of the EFL Cup, and then they still have the FA Cup. Now, just imagine that Arsenal were to draw either of Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, or Newcastle, or Fulham, or even if it were to be Sunderland or Wolverhampton Wanderers, even if it were to be Brentford, if they can go through against Mansfield, like I do expect them tomorrow. I mean, that in itself, that kind of game requires you to literally bring closer to your A team, and in this busy congestion of fixtures, you want your players to get as much rest as they can afford to. Yet in comparison, let's say if you are to draw, let's say a Norwich City, and I don't mean to say Norwich is a very weak team, or a Mansfield Town, you'd sort of perhaps could rely on your predominantly B team to go through against that. Wolves against Arsenal predictions. That is TTH Vision. TT has been quite AWOL on the channel ever since the end of the Africa Cup of Nations. But it's a pleasure to have you back, TT. It's a difficult game, given how the context in which we saw the first leg, that Arsenal did not even score a goal in that game. They relied on 2 own goals to win that game by 2-1. For those of you that remember, 2 late goals in that game, with an equalizer for Fulham and then an own goal by Mosquera that decided to give Arsenal 3 points. And that game was at the Emirates Stadium. So it was that hard because Wolves played in such a conservative manner that Rob Edwards set them up that it became very difficult for Arsenal to break through. So they go to Molineux, where, Wolves have not had much joy. We're talking about a team that has only won 1 Premier League game throughout the entire season, and that was a 3-0 victory against West Ham United. Then they've had a couple of draws in there. So, unfortunately, given how Arsenal and they nervously, in part, played against Brentford, I'd fancy Arsenal to grind it out, maybe by 2-1. But I do expect Wolves to play in such a conservative manner, no different from how they played the first leg. No different from how they played the first leg. Because they know if they let themselves open, as they did against Manchester United in the first leg at Molineux, they could get beat 4 or even more, like Man United did to them. So they'll come in that fixture well aware what Arsenal are capable of doing. So if you Wolverhampton Wanderers, do not change the blueprint from the first leg. Just look to be better defensively. Cut out the mistakes, and maybe you force Arsenal into a defeat. You force Arsenal into dropping another, a couple of points. And hell, how do Manchester City would love to see that, because Arsenal will play that game. That means Man City for this foreseeable future will always have a game in hand against the Arsenal. TT Vision says, yes, the AFCON was depressing for me, and also I support Arsenal, so it's not easy. Haha. I completely understand where you come from, especially given that result from Thursday. I completely understand. Arsenal fans have been a bit upbeat following that result, but I say to you, hang in there, and hope against hope, because I understand the anxiety. But if all Arsenal fans could hear us, I would say keep supporting your team, cheer them on. It's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be smooth, it's going to be difficult, but keep supporting them so that you maybe, and just maybe, they can get it over the line. It's not going to be easy because it's Man City breathing down your neck. It's Man City, they have the experience, they've done that time and time again before. So it makes it a bit harder, Then I say, Mosinguzi says, but I would like Arsenal to win Man City in the round of 16, the FA Cup. Wow, I don't know if you're an Arsenal fan, but that I don't think that would be the kind of prayer that an Arsenal fan would. Why? The reason for that is because you still have 2 guaranteed games against Man City already. That's the finals of the Carabao Cup on March the 22nd. It will be Sunday. You have a Premier League game against Man City on April 18th. Then there's a possibility of meeting Manchester City in the UEFA Champions League, because your journeys in the Premier League are not parallel, So there's that possibility. So just imagine you have to face, like I've told you, any Premier League team at this stage of the competition, especially teams that are still in multiple competitions. Even if you're Newcastle, who are already knocked out of the EFL Cup but are still in the FA Cup, trying to battle their way into a better position in the Premier League, and are still in the UEFA Champions League, for which they have playoffs to play against Karabakh. That's next week and the week after that, in a home and away sort of fixture, or in a round robin. You're hoping against hope that you do not draw, a Premier League team, because then that takes a toll on your squad. No matter how good a squad you have, no matter how broad a squad you have. Because take the example, look at how Pep Guardiola set up his team against Salford just over the concluded weekend. It was a very, very strong team, in that you had Tijan Reinders in there, you had the Nico Gonzalez, you had the John Stones, who was returning from injury, I think Nathan Ake, Max Alenya, James Trafford, you had a pretty strong, kind of team in that sort of in that fixture. So Omar Mamouche was up front there. I think plus Ryan Cherki, Antoine Semenyo came on in that game, So it tells you that the kind of importance that is attached to the competition itself by these teams that are looking to win it, it was actually Kushanov that played alongside John Stones with Ryan Atnori at left back, Rocco Royce in midfield. You had Ryan Cherki, Phil Foden, and Tijani Wenders with Omar Mamouche. But by the end of that game, Manchester City had brought on players like Phil Foden, Antoine Semenyo, Nico O'Reilly, Mark Kay, Rodrigo Cascante. And so you can imagine, you can imagine. So if the demands are that, and you're still in the UEFA Champions League, you have a final to play, you're still pushing down at the throat of Arsenal to play in the final, to win the Premier League title, then you want as much rotation in your squad as possible, really remaining on a winning track. So I don't think Arsenal fans will agree with your humble prayer on that one. You say, okay, this is wonderful. Oh, wonderful what? Wonderful nature, 6-1. Wonderful nature. Okay. I don't know if I'm missing the comment. It's not reflecting here. I don't know why. Okay. It's not. Let me read it from this other side. You say, hello, I'm from India. Say something about India. Hello, wonderful nature. How is India? Thank you so much, Team India. Team India has been very, very kind to me on this channel. So I say thank you too. I hope the World Cup, the Cricket World Cup T20 is going well for Team India there. That's my only hope for you. But I hope you're doing well. TT Vision says, do you think Eze at the central midfield would work like it did today? I would say it would work, but not in all games, because let's be honest, in many of the games, you need a double pivot. But it's a conversation we've had before, and this was regarding about playing a single pivot and playing Eberechi Eze and Martin Odegaard in the same game. So for me, I would rather you have that. I would have loved that midfield trio. And I used to make the argument that when you come up in sort of lesser games or smaller games in comparison to others, as can be the case, especially for teams that are not going to sit back too deep, you can sort of play with them because then you have a ball winner or the anchorman, either Zubimendi or Declan Rice, although I'd go for a Declan Rice, very good, a ball winner, very athletic, almost tireless, works like a horse. And then you have Martin Odegaard, who is a ball carrier, ball distributor, and dictates the tempo. And then you have Eberechi Eze, who can play off the cuffs and capable, moving bodies around by dribbling past players, but also has that quick pass that you need that sometimes Martin Odegaard doesn't offer you because he takes an extra touch or two. So I think it could work. But I do not think Mikel Arteta, with his level of conservativeness, he would do it. We saw him try to do it. It was in Arsenal's victory against West Ham by 2-0. But even in that game, Martin Odegaard got withdrawn in the first half because he sustained a knee injury when he had his, was it the medial ligament or something? Meniscus, something like that. When he had the clash between him and Samavi, for those of you that care to remember, then what do you think is wrong with Odegaard, or has he been overplayed? One, I'd say he's been very unfortunate this season with injuries, and that seems to be a recurring bad or track of bad luck from last season. Remember last season he had an ankle injury that kept him out of action for about 2 months. And when he returned from that injury, he was never the same player until the later parts of the season or later stages of the season. Then when you look at this season, he's literally not built himself any momentum, where you have that sort of feel-good factor about yourself when you inform you're affecting games the right way. One, he suffered, I think now, 5 injuries. This is the fifth. He had 2 shoulder injuries, then he had a knee injury, and then recently, again he had, was it a knee issue? I think a knee issue, and now he's back with the same issue. So, being in and out of the team never helps any player to build any level of momentum. Look at, assess the Arsenal squad and make out, in your personal opinion, who you think have been some of the best players for the Arsenal this season. You'll find that there's a direct correlation or relationship between consistent game time played and and um, and that kind of form that they've enjoyed. Personally, I'd point to you, to players like Yuan Timber, players like Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi. They've had that consistency on the pitch. They've had it. Look at even Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba. All around, there's some of the players that have had the more minutes or the most amount of minutes for the Arsenal this season. Even though Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba equally have suffered their fair share of injuries in here and there. For example, William Saliba missed the game against Brentford. He returned today and played a good number of minutes before Mali Salmon was brought on to replace him. Martin Zubimendi has played a good chunk of minutes for the Arsenal. He's looked overall impressive. So there's that direct correlation between how brilliant they've been and that. Then my brother, how are you? That's Football Royale. Always a pleasure to see you back on the channel. Guys, kindly like the broadcast. Please like the broadcast. Do me that absolute honor and favor and like the broadcast. You say this is Baka. Yes, Baka is back with us. Says, hi, me again. Have a good life. A love from Takie. Thank you so much, Team Takie. Recently, I've had a lot of love from Takie. Thank you so much, Team Takie. Always a pleasure. Football Real says, Madueke on the right wing works better than Saka on the right wing. Again, this is something that we've spoken about before. I don't remember whether it was Musinguzi that had made the submission about Madueke. But like I said, yes, it was him that you spoke about Madueke. Like I said, excuse me, there's a mosquito roaming around me. But like I said, Bukayo Saka his season has been hampered with injuries. But even when he's been on the pitch, he's hardly had the kind of impact that we are accustomed to him having on games, because his goals and assists have fallen far between, And it's not to say that Madueke has not been given the chance. Let's be honest. Every time we've had the absence of Bukayo Saka, he's been given minutes. And today, for the first time, we saw them play in the same team, with both players not playing on the wings. Now, the reason as to why it's not the first time we've seen them in the same game, because we had seen them before with Madueke being played on the left, which is where I do not prefer to see him. I always prefer him on the right. But today, you had Bukayo Saka play in that bit of a 10 role, because you had Noni Madueke and Gabriel Martinelli on the other side. So for me, every time he's been given time or minutes, he's done his best to deliver. But like I said earlier on, allow me to repeat myself for the purpose or for the benefit of Football Royale. My reservation about him is about his final ball, whether he's taking an attempt on goal, whether he's trying to pass that ball, that final touch is still letting him down. And then in some cases, his decision making, he has no problem outpacing players, taking on a couple of players to create, that bit of space that he needs. But when it comes to that finishing touch, whether he's having an attempt on goal, whether he's trying to provide an assist, that final ball is still lacking. I've said this before on multiple forums, and when I say multiple forums, I mean this channel, and for those with whom I engage on TikTok in different football lives, people that do them over there, that he reminds me of a raw Raheem Sterling. For those of you that remember Raheem Sterling at Liverpool when he was still just coming out, he had the athleticism, he could take on players, but that final touch was still bad, was still not convincing enough. I think it took a player, the quality and skill set of Luis Suarez, to make him look brilliant alongside Daniel Sturridge. For those of you that particularly remember, I think it was the 2013-2014 campaign when Liverpool pushed for the Premier League title, and And then subsequently, 2014-2015 seasons, around those 2 seasons, when Liverpool really looked good under Brendan Rodgers before he gets sacked. But because in the 2014-2015 season, he didn't look so great, so they ended up sacking him. I think it was around September or October before Jurgen Klopp comes in. But the season prior to that, he had sort of shined his way through. But I look at him the earlier days, and he was that rough diamond in a way, for lack of a better description. So I look at Noni Madueke like a bit of a rough diamond. He's just out of the mines. He's not yet polished to shine as you expect him to be, or as you want him to be. That's the sort of impression I get about Noni Madueke. I have nothing against him, but I want to see that athleticism, that dribbling, end up with a good finished product. Whether it's a shot at goal, whether it's an assist that he attempts, I want to see that good final product from him. That's all I demand from him. It takes me to also another player who I used to like so much, not that I no longer do, but he's called Teke Fusakubo. He's played for clubs like Rayo Mallorca, he's played for Real Sociedad, and then Kaoru Mitoma. They need to add numbers to their games in terms of goals and assists to stand out, because they have the talent, they have the skill set, they have the speed, and that kind of thing. So Noni Madueke is in that sort of bracket, So I think if he can polish or work on those things, and maybe because this is his first time season working with Mikel Arteta. Remember Mikel Arteta receiving lots of praises for the kind of work that he did on polishing Raheem Sterling and Leroy Sané during his time as assistant manager with Man City. Unfortunately, also, it could be a good or bad thing depending on how you look at it. Two sides of the coin, depending on two sides of the glass. One is seeing half empty, another is seeing half full. But I think he will work on him. Unfortunately, the reason as to why I say unfortunately is that for Arsenal, this feels like a very, very critical season for Mikel Arteta, that he may not have all the time to, begin polishing players. He wants that bit of a finished product. So that's why they went for these kinds of players, the Eberechi Ezes of this world, that kind of finished product, the Victor Gyökeres, players that do not need a lot of polishing, players that are going to come into this Arsenal machine and sort of fit in like gloves, or fit in like nozzles or spark plugs in a car engine. That kind of feel, that's what you're looking for, because this is his 6th year with the Gunners. They need to win something major. They need to win a major trophy, because I keep saying this and I keep banging on the same table. Until Arsenal cross the line and win a Premier League title, nobody's going to believe that they are going to win it beyond a reasonable doubt. Even those that believe this time around that they will go on ahead and win it, including myself, because I made the prediction at the start of the season that they will go ahead and win the Premier League title, I still remain with a certain level of doubt, So it's with reasonable doubt that I submit that until they cross that line, we're never going to believe that they can actually cross the line. So that they need to win a trophy as major as the UEFA Champions League, for Arsenal fans to have a bit of calmness about Mikel Arteta. Otherwise, even if you were to win a cup double in the EFL Cup and the FA Cup, it will be deemed insufficient, given the level of investment in terms of time and resources dedicated to him to get the team to where he's gotten them to. Yes, he picked them from literally the doldrums, but he's put them at that level, and he needs to take them to the next level. Otherwise, you're going to have a good chunk of Arsenal fans who think he is not the guy to take us to that next level, that finishing line. And then you'll have perhaps a set of players who think, well, we've been part of this project for the last 3-4 critical years, and we are yet to get the silverware. Maybe, perhaps it's time for us to move on and find greener pastures elsewhere that would more or less guarantee, a bit of silverware. Maybe they look at themselves like a Michael Olise, that if I go to Bayern Munich, I'll end up with some piece of silverware. If I'm a Hurricane, or maybe if I go to PSG, I'll end my career with something, as opposed to keep waiting for it year in, year out with the Gunners. Maybe if I go to Man City, maybe if I go to Real Madrid, maybe if I go to a Barcelona. I mean, you have all these higher clubs that could come calling, at any given time. And the last thing Arsenal want is to sort of break this mold of a project that they perfectly try to build over time. Because when I say over time, you have players in that were signed in Mikel Arteta's first 4 seasons. Players like Gabriel Magalhaes, it was far from a finished product. He's had to mature with the project, and he's one of the most sought after defenders or most admired defenders in the Premier League as we speak. So in that sort of context, really, if to put it that way, unless there's any other question, but I think we've looked at it all. Okay, let's look at some of the other results that we had today. In as far as elsewhere was concerned, like I said, tomorrow Barcelona in action against Girona. Barcelona playing away in the Italian Serie A. Cagliari will be against Lecce. We've told you about Macclesfield FC against Brentford. That game will come in the FA Cup tomorrow night. But in the other results, Athletic Bilbao beat up against Oviedo by 2-1 in the Spanish La Liga. Atletico de Madrid were thrashed by Rayo Vallecano by 3-0. Not the kind of result that I would have anticipated Diego Simeone who register, especially on the back of an emphatic victory against Barcelona. Maybe that 4-0 victory against Barcelona in the first leg of the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey would them into thinking that they're at the climax of the season, and they got themselves drunk before coming for the Vallecano game that they got that beat. Meanwhile, Valencia also beat Levante by 2-0, while Real Betis just beat up against Mallorca by 2-1. In the German Bundesliga, Heidenheim lost to Augsburg by 1-0, while RB Leipzig and Wolfsburg shared the spoils in a 2-2 draw. In the Italian Serie A, Sassuolo beat up against Udinese by 0-0, while Cremonese and Genoa shared the spoils in a goalless draw. Then Parma won their game against Hellas Verona by 2-1, just as Bologna did away against Torino. Napoli and AC Roma, that one finished 2-2. And then in the French League 1, Le Havre beat up against Toulouse by 2-1. Lorient put 2 past Angers, while Métis lost to Auxerre by 3-1. Lyon just beat up against Nice by 2-0. Colin Tolisso there on target, as well as Nati on target for Olympic Lyon. So those are some of the other results from the major 5 leagues as did go down. Like we said, in the UK this weekend, it was all about the FA Cup, but action in the Premier League does continue on Wednesday night when Arsenal take on Wolverhampton Wanderers. That game is going to be at Molineux. Arsenal are away. Remember, Arsenal were away over the weekend. In midweek. So Arsenal are going to play 3 consecutive games away from home in the Premier League, because after playing Wolves away, they will travel to Tottenham Hotspur next, even though it's quite a very short distance between them and their North London rivals for the North London derby. So please keep that in mind. Then also, I will get to perhaps look at this more in the due course of the week, but do not forget the UEFA Champions League playoffs do return this week on Tuesday and Wednesday respectively, with Galatasaray up against Juventus. That game will kick off at 8:45 p.m. Dortmund against Atlanta, Monaco against PSG, Benfica against Real Madrid. That will be for Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, Karabakh will take on Newcastle. Olympiacos will be up against Leverkusen, while Bodo Glimt will entertain Inter Milan. And then Club Brugge will be up against Atletico de Madrid. And then the week after that, then there will be the return legs for the 2 sides. One of the games that the encounters that I'm really, really looking forward to is the one between Benfica and Real Madrid, given how things are transpired in Portugal on match day 8 of the Champions League, when Benfica put 4 past Real Madrid, who could only answer with 2. Then Monaco PSG, even though Monaco are not at the kind of levels that we may hold them with high regard, I look forward to that encounter. And then Bodo Glimt against Inter, those are some of the actions that I'm really, really looking forward to in as far as the UEFA Champions League playoffs are concerned. So anyways, guys, why don't you allow me wrap it up here? Yes, I was late for the broadcast, but by 1 hour, but I do appreciate all the company that you guys have given me. Football Royal, always a pleasure to have you around. Baka from Turkey, always a pleasure. TTH Vision, nice to see you return. Mosingozi Evans, It's been a pleasure having you on here for the first time, and I hope you subscribe to the channel that you do not miss out on other opportunities of joining us whenever you can. Then Chaine Adams, this one, left us with a comment. He did not return. I wanted to answer his question with a better context, but when I asked, he did not respond. Quite very unfortunate. But Chaine Adams, thank you so much. Then Rudolph King, thank you so much for being part of this broadcast. Ahmed, it was a pleasure having you around. Then Fernando Hernandez, it was a pleasure having you earlier on the broadcast. So for those of you that have been part of this 90s podcast, thank you so much for dedicating the time to be a part of our conversations. We'll be back tomorrow morning at around 9 a.m. 9:30 a.m. Thereabout. Just keep your notifications turned on, and then you'll be notified once we go live. To further, do this again, look at what's to come in the new week, and perhaps another snapshot of the review from the weekend, among other things that we could have taken note, or those that we may have skipped as we continue with the conversation. It is your engagement that brings certain things to light for me, or remind me to put a bit of emphasis or to shed more light on there. So thank you so much. Have a blessed night, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.